Part 3. The Centrality of Ukrainian Oligarch Ihor Kolomoisky. The real person who was the benefactor to and boss of Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, at the Ukrainian gas exploration company Burisma Holdings was not the person that the American press says was, Mykola Zlochevsky, who had been part of the Ukrainian government until Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych was overthrown in February 2014. But it was instead Ihor Kolomoisky, who was part of the newly installed Ukrainian government, which the Obama administration itself had actually just installed in Ukraine. And that phone conversation appointing Ukraine's new leader is explained here, in which the head of the private CIA firm Stratfor has correctly called the most blatant coup in history. Here's more explanation of that coup, which was done by Obama. One cannot even begin to accurately understand the impeachment proceedings against America's current president Donald Trump, Ukrainegate, unless one first knows and understands accurately what the relationships were between Trump and the current government of Ukraine, and the role that the Obama administration had played in forming that government, installing it, and the role that Hunter Biden had been hired to perform for his actual boss at Burisma, Kolomoisky, soon after Obama, via Obama's agent Victoria Nuland, had installed Ukraine's new government. As I had written on September 28, 2019, quote, in order to understand why Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky doesn't want the dirt about Joe Biden to become public, one needs to know that Hunter Biden's boss and benefactor at Burisma Holdings was, at least partly, Zelensky's boss and benefactor until Zelensky became Ukraine's president, and that revealing this would open up a can of worms which would place that former boss and benefactor of both men into prison at lots of places. That article, at the phrase dug up in 2012, discussed and linked to a careful 2012 study of Burisma which had actually been done in Ukraine by an investigative nonprofit, Antac, funded by America's billionaire George Soros, who was another major funder of the 2014 Ukrainian coup, as well as Barack Obama's political career itself, in order to help bring down Yanukovych. However, what the study found was not the incriminating evidence against Zlochevsky which had been hoped. It found instead that the person who owned the controlling interest in Burisma was not really the Yanukovych supporter Mykola Zlochevsky. It was, in fact, the Ukrainian billionaire Ihor Kolomoisky, who supported Yanukovych's overthrow. Kolomoisky, shortly after the coup, became appointed as the governor in a region of Ukraine by the Obama administration's post-coup Ukrainian government. Obama's financial backer Soros knew, or should have known, that Zlochevsky had sold almost all of his Burisma holdings to Kolomoisky in 2011. But Obama's administration was nonetheless trying to get the newly installed Ukrainian government to prosecute Zlochevsky because Zlochevsky was associated with the Ukrainian president whom Obama had just overthrown. Hunter Biden's function was to help protect Mr. Kolomoisky against being targeted by the newly installed government in the anti-corruption campaign that the Obama administration and the EU were pressing upon that new Ukrainian government. Hunter Biden was to serve as a U.S. fixer for his new boss Kolomoisky to deflect the anti-corruption campaign away from Kolomoisky as a target and toward Zlochevsky as a target. And Hunter's father, Joe Biden, followed through on that by demanding that Ukraine prosecute Zlochevsky, not Kolomoisky. Soros isn't really against corruption. He is against corruption by countries that he wants to take over, and that he uses the U.S. government in order to take over. Neoconservatism is simply imperialism, which has always been the foreign affairs ideology of aristocrats and billionaires. In America's case, that includes both Democratic and Republican billionaires. So it's just imperialism in America. All billionaires who care at all about international relations are imperialists, and in America that's called neoconservative. The American issue regarding Ukraine was never actually Ukraine's corruption. Corruption is standard and accepted throughout the U.S. and allied countries, but against countries they want to take over, it becomes a PR point in order to win acceptance by the goals of their own country's imperialism and its own associated corruption. Our country's corruption is acceptable, but yours is not, is the view. That's the standard imperialist view. Neoconservatism, imperialism anywhere, actually, is always based on lies. Imperialism, in fact, is part of nationalism, but it is excluded by patriotism. And no nationalist is a patriot. No patriot is a nationalist. Whereas a nationalist supports his country's billionaires, a patriot supports his country's residents, all of them, his countrymen, on a democratic basis, everyone having equal rights, not the richest of the residents having the majority or all of the rights. A nationalist is $1, one vote. A patriot is one resident, one vote. The only people who are intelligently nationalists are billionaires and the agents they employ. All other nationalists are their gulls. Everyone else is a patriot. Ordinarily, there are far more gulls than patriots. Information hasn't yet been published regarding what Trump's agent Rudolph Giuliani has found regarding Burisma, but the links in the present article link through to the evidence that I am aware of, and it's evidence which contradicts what the U.S. and allied press have been reporting about the Bidens' involvement in Ukraine. So, this information might be what Trump's team intend to reveal after the Democratic Party-controlled House of Representatives indicts Trump, send to the Republican Senate a recommendation to replace him by Mike Pence as America's president. If they do that, but regardless, this is what I have found, which U.S. and allied news media have conspicuously not only been ignoring, but blatantly contradicting the facts that are being documented by the evidence that is presented here. Consequently, the links in this article prove the systematic lying by America's press regarding Ukrainegate. After the Soros-funded ANTAC had discovered in 2012 that Kolomoisky ruled Burisma, the great independent Australian investigative journalist who has lived for 30 years in and reported from Moscow, John Helmer, headlined on February 19, 2015, one of his blockbuster news reports, "The Hunt for Burisma Part 2, What Role for Igor Kolomoisky, What London Missed, What Washington Doesn't Want to See." And he linked there not only to Ukrainian government records, but also to UK government records, and also to corporate records in Cyprus, Panama, and elsewhere to document that, indeed, Kolomoisky controlled Burisma. So all of the US and allied news reporting, which merely assumes that Zlochevsky controlled this firm when Hunter Biden became appointed to its board, are clearly false. See this, for example, from Britain's Guardian 2 years later on April 12, 2017, simply ignoring both the ANTAC report and the even more detailed Helmer report and presenting Zlochevsky, Kolomoisky's decoy, as the appropriate target to be investigated for Burisma's alleged corruption. So, when Joe Biden demanded that Ukraine's government prosecute Zlochevsky, Biden was not, as he claims he was, demanding a foreign government to act against corruption. He was instead demanding that foreign government, Ukraine, to carry out his own boss, Barack Obama's agenda to smear as much as possible he could Viktor Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president whom Obama had overthrown. This isn't to say that Yanukovych was not corrupt. Every post-Soviet Ukrainian president, and probably prime minister too, has been corrupt. Ukraine is famous for being corrupt, but this doesn't necessarily mean that Zlochevsky was corrupt. However, Kolomoisky is regarded in Ukraine as being perhaps the most corrupt of all Ukrainians. Perhaps Kolomoisky's major competitor has been Viktor Pinchuk, who has long been famous in Washington for donating heavily to Bill and Hillary Clinton's causes. For example, on March 11, 2018, the independent investigative journalist Jeff Carlson bannered Viktor Pinchuk, the Clintons, and Endless Connections, and he reported that Viktor Pinchuk is a Ukrainian billionaire. He is the founder of Interpipe, a steel pipe manufacturer. He also owns Credit Dnipro Bank, some ferroalloy plants, and a media empire. He is married to Elena Pinchuk, the daughter of former Ukrainian President Leonid Kuchma. Pinchuk's been accused of profiting immensely from the purchase of state-owned assets at severely below market prices through political favoritism. Pinchuk used his media empire to deflect blame from his father-in-law, Kuchma, for the September 16, 2000 murder of journalist Georgi Gonzagi. Kuchma was never charged but is widely believed to have ordered the murder. A series of recordings would seem to back up this assertion. On April 4th through April 12, 2016, Ukrainian parliamentarian Olga Bilkov had 4 meetings with Samuel Charap, International Institute for Strategic Studies, Liz Zentos, National Security Council, Michael Kimmage, State Department, and David Kramer, the McCain Institute. Doug Schoen filed FARA documents showing that he was paid $40,000 a month by Viktor Pinchuk, page 5, in part to arrange these meetings. Schoen attempted to arrange another 72 meetings with congressmen and media. It is unknown how many meetings took place. Schoen has worked for both Bill and Hillary Clinton. Schoen helped Pinchuk establish ties with the Clinton Foundation. The Wall Street Journal reported how Schoen connected Pinchuk with senior Clinton State Department staffers in order to pressure former Ukrainian President Yanukovych to release Yulia Tymoshenko, a political rival of Yanukovych, from jail. The relationship between Pinchuk and the Clintons continued. And I've done videos about Viktor Pinchuk in Ukraine, especially when we were going over the North Korean situation. The rocket engines for the long-range ballistic missiles that North Korea has been using have been identified by some experts in the field as being a Ukrainian post-Soviet model. And these, basically somehow North Korea obtained this technology, and it seems like it came from an external source, and one of the sources would have been Ukraine, and the time also was when the Obama coup was taking place. So the possibility exists that the Clintons helped arm North Korea with ballistic missiles as a result of the turmoil that was happening in Ukraine, and that technology may have been spirited away. A large network of collaborators, all connected to NATO's PR agency, the Atlantic Council, were also discussed and linked to, and in one of the video clips, Victoria Nuland headed a panel discussion in Munich, Germany, at which numerous leading Democratic Party neoconservatives and neoconservative foreign leaders discussed how wonderful the deep state is, and praised the Republican neocon John McCain, who had helped Victoria Nuland install the fascist government of Ukraine. On October 6, 2019, Helmer headlined, Ukrainian oligarch Viktor Pinchuk is putting his money on Joe Biden for president at $40,000 per month. That's $3,000 more per month than Burisma was paying Hunter Biden. He reported, Joe Biden's campaign for president, as well as his defense against charges of corrupt influence peddling and political collusion in the Ukraine, are being promoted in Washington by the Ukrainian oligarch Viktor Pinchuk through the New York lobbyist, candidate, advisor, and pollster Douglas Schoen. This follows several years of attempts by Pinchuk and Schoen to buy influence with Donald Trump, first as a candidate and then as president, with Trump's lawyer Rudy Giuliani and with John Bolton, Trump's national security advisor in 2018 and 19. Their attempts failed. Pinchuk has been paying Schoen more than $40,000 every month for 8 years. The amount of money is substantially greater than Biden's son Hunter Biden was paid by Pinchuk's Ukrainian rival Igor Kolomoisky through the oil company Burisma and Rosemont Seneca Bohai, Biden's New York front company. Pinchuk's message for the Democratic candidates and U.S. media, according to Schoen's Fox News broadcast in August, is, quote, stop killing your own, stop beating up on your own front-runner, Joe Biden. On November 12th, the New York Times headlined, Ukraine's president seeks face-to-face meeting with Putin, and reported that Zelensky is now sufficiently disturbed at the declining level of the EU's and Trump administration's continuing support for Ukraine's government, so that Zelensky is desperately trying to restore friendly relations with Russia. The next day, the newspaper bannered, a Ukrainian billionaire fought Russia. Now he's ready to embrace it. This report said, Mr. Kolomoisky, widely seen as Ukraine's most powerful figure outside government, given his role as the patron of the recently elected President Volodymyr Zelensky, has experienced a remarkable change of heart. It is time, he said, for Ukraine to give up on the West and turn back toward Russia. Kolomoisky, in other words, who had been on Obama's team in Ukraine, no longer is on the U.S. team under Trump. A reasonable inference would be that Kolomoisky increasingly fears the possibility of being prosecuted. Continuation of the Obama plan for Ukraine seems increasingly unlikely. Here are some crimes for which Kolomoisky might be prosecuted. Allegedly, Kolomoisky, along with the newly appointed Ukrainian Interior Minister Arsen Avakov, masterminded the May 2, 2014 extermination of perhaps hundreds of people who had been trapped inside Odessa's trade union's building after those victims had distributed anti-coup flyers. Allegedly, Kolomoisky, on March 20, 2015, brought to a board meeting of Ukraine's gas distribution company Ukrtransnafta, of which Kolomoisky was a minority shareholder, his hired thugs armed with guns in an unsuccessful attempt to intimidate the rest of the board to impose Kolomoisky's choice to lead the company. Ukraine's president Petro Poroshenko soon thereafter yielded to the pressure from Ukraine's bondholders to fire Kolomoisky as a regional governor, and then nationalized Ukraine's biggest bank, Private Bank, which had looted billions of dollars from depositors' accounts and secreted the proceeds in untraceable offshore accounts, so that the bank had to be bailed out by Ukraine's taxpayers. Otherwise, there would have been huge riots against Poroshenko. Zelensky is squeezed between his funder and his public, and so dithers. For example, on September 10, 2019, the Financial Times reported that the IMF has warned Ukraine that backsliding on private banks' nationalization would jeopardize its $3.9 billion standby program, and that officials expect Ukraine to push for a recovery of the $5.5 billion spent on rescuing the bank. Stealing $5.5 billion is a big crime, and this was Obama's Ukrainian government. Will it also be Trump's? There are others, but those could be starters. So both Kolomoisky and Zelensky are evidently now considering to seek Moscow's protection, though Kolomoisky had previously been a huge backer of and helped to fund killing of the Donbassers who rejected the Obama-imposed Russia-hating Ukraine regime. Any such prosecutions could open up to international scrutiny Obama's entire Ukrainian operation. That, in turn, would expose Obama's command complicity in the ethnic cleansing operation, which Kolomoisky's co-planner of the May 2, 2014 massacre inside the Odessa Trade Unions building, Arsen Avakov, euphemistically labeled the Anti-Terrorist Operation, or ATO, to eliminate as many as possible of the residents in the former Donbass region of Ukraine, where over 90% of the voters had voted for Yanukovych. It could also open up the enormous can of worms that is George Soros, because though Trump doesn't at all care about corruption in Ukraine, nor should he, since that's a Ukrainian domestic matter and therefore not appropriate and certainly not a matter of U.S. national security interest, Soros himself was quite possibly breaking both national and international laws in his interventions in Ukraine, and possibly also in his related investments or his threats not to invest there. Not only was he deeply involved in the coup, but afterward he was regularly advising Victoria Nuland. Whether even America's laws against insider trading were violated should also be considered. Part 4. Trump's many policy dilemmas regarding Ukraine. If Putin offers no helping hand to Zelensky, what will happen to Ukraine and to Ukrainians? Might Trump finally campaign for the United States to become one of the states parties to the International Criminal Court, so that Obama, Nuland, Soros, and others who had overthrown Ukraine's democratically elected government could be tried there? How would Trump be able to immunize himself for such crimes as his own April 14, 2018 unprovoked missile attack against Syria? How likely is it that he would ever actually become a supporter of international law, instead of an imperialist such as he has always been, and therefore opponent of international law? He, after all, is himself a billionaire, and no billionaire has ever fought for international law except in an instance where he benefited from it. Never for international law itself. Trump isn't likely to be the first. But here's how it could happen. Quick sidebar from me. The OCPW report, basically it's coming out now, and of course squelched by the mainstream media, that the gas attack by Assad in Syria was completely fake. There was never a gas attack. And it was all basically just manufactured media event by the White Helmets, which are basically an extension of the Western intelligence agencies. It was all just a hoax, essentially, to try and justify a reaction. Luckily, Trump, again, he had, assuming he knew this, which he did, he had two options. Basically, call it out and not do anything, and basically, again, most Americans don't understand the reality of politics. They still only understand the illusion and the theater, right? So he responded, he called their bluff, he responded with a missile strike, and he blew up a parking lot. Nobody died, right? Imagine launching 50 cruise missiles and not killing anyone. You either have the worst aim of anyone in the history of the world, or you were deliberately trying not to kill people because you knew there were no viable targets that should actually be hit. And that's what I believe Trump did. He called their bluff. He got them to it was like a wet dream for the neocons, basically, when he fired those missiles. And then basically they had to, sour on their dream because it turned out he shot them at nothing and hit no one. And basically nothing after that happened. And now he's trying to pull out of Syria entirely. But of course, facing resistance from the Pentagon. And so he just destroys all the bullshit narrative altogether by saying, we're going to go in there and just take the oil. Right? Just like he said in the 2016 election. That, back in 2016, I was very alarmed at that. But after seeing 3 years of the Trump presidency, I realize he is playing an immaculate game. He is using deep sarcasm and deep satire to basically call out the bluff of the neocons and, on the surface play along with them, but in reality completely stymie their entire goal and aim and game. And it's very hard to believe that that's the case, but that's what all the evidence is pointing towards. And again, lesser minds can never understand greater minds. All they can do is sit back and marvel. Anyway, continuing on. Donald Trump has surrounded himself with neoconservatives. There's not much distance between his policies toward Ukraine versus Barack Obama's and Joe Biden's. However, after Trump becomes impeached in the House, if that happens, and the impeachment trial starts in the Republican U.S. Senate, there will then be a perfect opportunity for Trump to embarrass the Democratic Party profoundly by exposing not only Joe Biden, but Biden's boss, Obama, as having caused the war in Ukraine. In order for him to do that, however, he'd also need to expose the rot of neoconservatism. Nobody in Washington does that, except perhaps the rebelling Democrat Tulsi Gabbard, and she's rejected in the national polls now by the public within her own party. Neoconservatism is the uniform foreign policy ideology of America's billionaires, both Republican and Democratic, and this is why Washington is virtually 100% neocon. In America, wealth certainly doesn't trickle down, but ideology apparently does. And that's not merely neoliberalism, but also its international affairs extension, neoconservatism. Nonetheless, if a Trump re-election ticket were Trump for president and Gabbard for vice president, it might be able to beat anything that the Democrats could put up against it, because Trump would then head a ticket which would remain attractive to Republicans and yet draw many independents and even the perhaps 5% of Democrats who like her. Only Sanders, if he becomes the Democratic nominee and who is the least neoconservative member of the U.S. Senate, would attract some of Gabbard's supporters. But he wouldn't be getting any money from the 607 people who mainly fund American politics. The 2020 U.S. presidential contest could just go hog wild. However, America's billionaires probably won't let that happen. Though there are only 607 of them, they have enormous powers over the government, far more than do all other Americans put together. The U.S. Supreme Court made it this way, such as by the 1976 Buckley decision and the 2010 Citizens United decision. So, while justice in this impeachment matter and in the 2020 elections is conceivable, it is extremely unlikely. The public are too deceived by America's big money people. As the neoconservative Democratic representative from Vermont, Peter Welch, said in the impeachment hearings on November 19th, quote, "And I'll say this to President Trump. You want to investigate Joe Biden? You want to investigate Hunter Biden? Go at it. Do it. Do it hard. Do it dirty. Do it the way you do. Just do it. Just don't do it by asking a foreign leader to help you in your campaign. That's your job, not his. My goal in these hearings is two things. One is to get an answer to Colonel Vindman's question. Quote, is it improper for the President of the United States to demand a foreign government investigate a United States citizen and political opponent? And the second coming out of this is for us as a Congress is to return to the Ukraine policy that Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy both support. It's not investigations, it's the restoration of democracy in Ukraine and the resistance of Russian aggression. He wants a return to Obama's anti-Russian Ukraine policy. Though Zelensky had won Ukraine's presidency by a record-shattering 73% because he had promised to end the war, which the U.S. had started, America's deep state are refusing to allow that. They want to force him to accept more U.S.-made weapons and more U.S. training of Ukraine's troops and how to use them against its next-door neighbor, Russia. Furthermore, in some respects, Trump is even more neoconservative than Obama was. Trump single-handedly nullified Obama's only effective and good achievement, the Iran nuclear deal. I actually agree with that. Against Iran, Trump is considerably more of a neocon than was Obama. Trump has squeezed Iranians so hard with his sanctions as to block other countries from buying from and selling to Iran, and this blockade has greatly impoverished Iranians who are now rioting against their government. Trump wants them to overthrow their government. His plan might succeed. Trump's biggest donor, Sheldon Adelson, hates Iranians, and Trump is his man. On Iran, Trump remains a super neocon. Perhaps Adelson doesn't require him to hate Russians too. And, again, in terms of rhetoric and on the surface, yes, that's all true, and I agree with that. But at the same time, he's had a couple opportunities to actually strike Iran and he deliberately did not. I think that he, again, is playing along with the neocons to get them to froth at the mouth and expose their maniacal intentions to the public. But in reality, he remains committed to détente with Russia and China and peace in the Middle East as much as that is possible. Continuing. Furthermore, on November 17th, the day when riots broke out in Iran against Iran's government, Abdullah Muradoglu headlined in Turkey's newspaper Yeni Şafak, Bolivia's Morales was overthrown by a Western coup just like Iran's Mossadegh. And he presented strong circumstantial evidence that that coup, too, which had occurred on November 10th, had been a U.S. operation. How could Trump criticize Obama for the coup against Ukraine when Trump's own coup against Bolivia is in the news? Sidebar from me. Again, that, the deep state and the Pentagon and the CIA are in control of a lot of these things. Trump, again, if this is something that's, caused by the Western Empire, I think it is Trump's responsibility to try and get to the bottom of it and prevent it. But I think it may not essentially be Trump's coup against Bolivia. It might just be one more thing that the deep state is doing that he hasn't responded to yet. But we'll see. Who knows? Continuing. America is now a two-party fascist dictatorship. One criminal U.S. president won't publicly expose the crimes of another criminal U.S. president who was his predecessor. The next much-discussed witness that the Democrats brought forth to testify against Trump was America's ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, who on November 20th. Sondland was a hotels and real estate tycoon like Trump. Prior to Trump's becoming president, Sondland had no experience in diplomacy. At the start of 2017, 4 companies registered to Sondland donated $1 million to the Donald Trump inaugural committee. And then, a year later, Trump appointed him to his ambassadorial post. Sondland evasively responded to the aggressive questioning by Senate Democrats trying to get him to say that Trump had been trying to bribe Zelensky. Then, the lawfare blog of the staunchly neoconservative Brookings Institution, Benjamin Witt's, headlined, Gordon Sondland accuses the president of bribery. And Witt's asserted that today, Ambassador Gordon Sondland, testifying before the House in the ongoing impeachment inquiry, offered a crystal clear account of how President Trump engaged in bribery. But Sondland provided no evidence except his own opinion, which can be seen online at opening statement before the United States House of Representatives when he said, quote, Fourth, as I testified previously, Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing investigations of the 2016 election and DNC server in Burisma. Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States, and we knew that these investigations were important to the President. However, in his prior closed-door October 17, 2019 testimony to the senators, he had said that on September 9th, quote, I asked the president, what do you want from Ukraine? The president responded, nothing. There is no quid pro quo. The president repeated, no quid pro quo. No quid pro quo multiple times. This was a very short call, and I recall that the president was really in a bad mood. I tried hard to address Ambassador Taylor's concerns because he is valuable and an effective diplomat, and I took very seriously the issues he raised. I did not want Ambassador Taylor to leave his post and generate even more turnover in the Ukraine mission. That Ambassador Taylor was William B. Taylor, Jr., a West Point Army and NATO neoconservative whom George W. Bush had made U.S. ambassador to Ukraine in 2006-2009, and whom Trump, at the suggestion of Trump's neoconservative Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, had appointed to succeed Ambassador Yovanovitch in May. The testimony of all these people was entirely in keeping with their neoconservatism and was therefore extremely hostile toward anything but preparing Ukraine to join NATO and serve on the front line of America's war to conquer Russia. Trump might be too stupid to understand anything about ideology or geostrategy, but only if a person accepts neoconservatism is the anger that these subordinates of his express toward him for his being viewed by them as placing other concerns, whether his own or else America's, for withdrawing America from Obama's war against Russia, suitable reason for Congress to force Trump out of office. That is a sentence that needs some work. Given that Trump, even in Sondland's account, did say the president responded, nothing, there is no quid pro. The president repeated, no quid pro quo multiple times. There is nothing that's even close to a beyond a reasonable doubt standard, which is provided by their personal feelings that Trump had a quid pro quo about anything regarding Ukraine. A policy of Obama's that Trump should instead firmly have abandoned and denounced as soon as he became president. Testimony from his own enemies, whom Trump had been stupid enough to have appointed, when he hadn't simply extended Obama's neoconservative policies and personnel regarding Ukraine, falls far short of impeachable. But right and wrong won't determine the outcome here anyway, because America has become a two-party, one-ideology dictatorship. And I agree in the sense that it was stupid for Trump to leave Obama loyalists and holdovers in his administration and just, let them leak all the info that's been leaking. But again, I think that what Mr. Zeus may be missing is just the realpolitik aspect. That Trump knows that if he bucks the entire system at once, the system will eliminate him physically. And so he has to play this complex, Russian doll game, pun intended, right? Where intentions are masked inside of intentions. But, it's my thesis that the core intention is benevolent to the people of America and the people of the world, and reaching a functional détente and understanding with Russia and China to build a good form of world government, at least a functional way for countries to resolve their differences and work on joint problems, which, again, the New World Order was the original plan, but I think that Trump and Xi and Putin are working towards a different kind of New World Order, a new World Order. And I think that, if it's transparent and it's functional and it's respectful of national sovereignty, I think that it's possible, technically. We'll see. That's the thesis. Anyway, this is what happens when billionaires control a country. It produces the type of foreign policies the country's billionaires want rather than what the public actually need. This is America's government today. It's drastically different than what the America's founders had hoped. Instead of its representing the states equally with 2 senators for each, instead of representing the citizens equally with proportional per capita representation in the U.S. House, and instead of yet a third system of the Electoral College of choosing the government's chief executive and commander-in-chief, it has become thoroughly corrupted to being, in effect, just $1, one vote, an aristocracy of wealth controlling the entire government, exactly what the founders had waged the revolution in order to overthrow and prevent from ever occurring, a dictatorial aristocracy as constituting our government today. Although again, my sidebar to Mr. Zeus here, if money was all it took to buy an office, then Hillary Clinton would be the president today. But there's more than money going on, and Trump understands that, and he played it, and he won. And so again, Zeus is a liberal kind of, going on his liberal tirade here, but I think it's obvious that there's more going on here than just, the billionaires and the money control everything. Continuing. P.S. Though I oppose almost everything that the hearing's ranking minority member, the neoconservative and, of course, also neoliberal Republican Devin Nunes stands for, I close here with his superb summary of the hearings on November 21st, in which he validly described the Democrats' scandalously trashy Ukrainegate case against Trump. Even though he refused to look deeper to the issues I raised in this article, he dealt here merely with how shoddy the case the Democrats had presented was. Throughout these bizarre hearings, the Democrats have struggled to make the case that President Trump committed some impeachable offense on his phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. The offense itself changes depending on the day, ranging from quid pro quo to extortion to bribery to obstruction of justice, then back to quid pro quo. It's clear why the Democrats have been forced onto this carousel of accusations. President Trump had good reason to be wary of Ukrainian election meddling against his campaign and of widespread corruption in that country. President Zelensky, who didn't even know aid to Ukraine was being paused at the time of the call, has repeatedly said that there was nothing wrong with the conversation. The aid was resumed without the Ukrainians taking the actions they were supposedly being coerced into doing. Aid to Ukraine under President Trump has been much more robust than it was under President Obama, thanks to the provision of Javelin anti-tank weapons. As numerous witnesses have testified, temporary holds on foreign aid occur fairly frequently for many different reasons. So how do we have an impeachable offense here when there's no actual misdeed and no one even claiming to be a victim? The Democrats have tried to solve this dilemma with a simple slogan, quote, "He got caught." President Trump, we are to believe, was just about to do something wrong, and getting caught was the only reason he backed down from whatever nefarious thought crime the Democrats are accusing him of almost committing. I once again urge Americans to continue to consider the the credibility of the Democrats on this committee, who are now hurling these charges for the last 3 years. It's not President Trump who got caught, it's the Democrats who got caught. They got caught falsely claiming they had more than circumstantial evidence that Trump colluded with Russians to hack the 2016 election. They got caught orchestrating this entire farce with the whistleblower and lying about their secret meetings with him. They got caught defending the false allegations of the Steele dossier, which was paid for by them. They got caught breaking their promise that impeachment will only go forward with bipartisan support because of how damaging it is to the American people. They got caught running a sham impeachment process between secret depositions, hidden transcripts, and an unending flood of Democrat leaks to the media. They got caught trying to obtain nude photos of President Trump from Russian pranksters pretending to be Ukrainians, and they got caught covering up for Alexandra Chalupa, a Democratic National Committee operative who colluded with Ukrainian officials to smear the Trump campaign by improperly redacting her name from deposition transcripts and refusing to let Americans hear her testimony as a witness in these proceedings. That is the Democrats' pitiful legacy in recent years. They got caught. Meanwhile, their supposed star witness testified that he was guessing that President Trump was tying Ukrainian aid to investigations despite no one telling him that was true, and the president himself explicitly telling him the opposite, that he wanted nothing from Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, unless the Democrats once again scramble their kangaroo court rules, today's hearing marks the merciful end of this spectacle in the impeachment committee, formerly known as the Intelligence Committee. Whether the Democrats reap the political benefit they want from this impeachment remains to be seen, but the damage they have done to this country will be long-lasting. Will this wrenching attempt to overthrow the president? They have pitted Americans against one another and poisoned the minds of fanatics who actually believe the entire galaxy of bizarre accusations they have leveled against the president since the day the American people elected him. I sincerely hope the Democrats in this affair end this as quickly as possible so our nation can begin to heal the many wounds it has inflicted on us. The people's faith in government and their belief that their vote counts for something has been shaken. From the Russia hoax to this shoddy Ukrainian sequel, the Democrats got caught. Let's hope they finally learn a lesson, give their conspiracy theories a rest, and focus on governing for a change. In addition, Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2J1, the Republican members transmit a request to convene a minority day of hearings. Today you have blocked key witnesses that we have requested from testifying in this partisan impeachment inquiry. This rule was not displaced by House Resolution 660, and therefore under House Rule 11, Clause 1A, it applies to the Democrats' impeachment inquiry. We look forward to the chair promptly scheduling an agreed-upon time for the minority day of hearings so that we can hear from key witnesses that you have continually blocked from testifying. I'd also like to take a quick moment on the assertion Ms. Hill made in the statement that she submitted to this committee, in which she claimed that some committee members deny that Russia meddled in the 2016 election. As I noted in my opening statement on Wednesday, but in March 2018, Intelligence Committee Republicans published the results of a year-long investigation into Russian meddling. The 240-page report analyzed 2016 Russian meddling campaign, the U.S. government reaction to it, Russian campaigns in other countries, and provided specific recommendations to improve American election security. I would have asked my staff to hand these reports to our two witnesses today just so I can have a recollection of their memory. As America may or may not know, Democrats refused to sign on to the Republican report. Instead, they decided to adopt a minority view filled with collusion conspiracy theories. Needless to say, it is entirely possible for two separate nations to engage in election meddling at the same time, and Republicans believe we should take meddling seriously by all foreign countries, regardless of which campaign is the target. Later that day, the New York Times headlined, "The impeachment hearings revealed a lot, none of it great for Trump." And CNN headlined, "The public impeachment hearings were a total GOP disaster." The non-mainstream news medium Zero Hedge instead bannered, "Amid impeachment circus, Dems sneak Patriot Act renewal past the American people," and reported that the bill was pushed through with not a single Republican vote. The following day, the AP headlined, "Analysis, mountain of impeachment evidence is beyond dispute," and closed, "Ask what the consequences are if Congress allows an American president to ask a foreign government to investigate a political rival. Fiona Hill said simply, it's a very bad precedent." The latest 2019 Reuters International survey, in which over 2,000 people in each one of the 38 countries were asked whether they agree that you can trust the news most of the time, shows that the United States scores number 32 out of the 38, at the very top of the bottom 16% of all the 38 countries surveyed regarding trust in the news media. Reuters had previously found in their 2018 edition that among Americans, those who identify on the left, 49%, have almost 3 times as much trust in the news as those on the right, 17%. The left gave their support to newspapers like the Washington Post and New York Times, while the right's alienation from mainstream media has become ever more entrenched. In the 2019 edition, what had been 49% of America rose now to 53%, and what had been 17% sank now to 9%. The billionaires, i.e. mainstream media, are trusted only by liberals here. What the media report is considered trustworthy only by liberals in today's America, by 53% to only 9%, an almost 6-to-1 ratio. The skeptics of the billionaires' press are Republicans. Of course, if the media are distrusted, then the nation can't be functioning as a democracy. But the media will be distrusted if they lie as much as America's do. Untrusted news media are a sure indication that the nation is a dictatorship, such as it is if the billionaires control the media. In America, only liberals think that America is a democracy, and therefore might possess the basic qualification, democracy, to decide what nations need to be regime changed, such as America did to Iran, Iraq, Libya, Honduras, Bolivia, and is still trying to do to Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Iran again, Syria, and Yemen, but not to, for examples, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Israel. And which ones don't, such as America's governmentally appointed allies, including some barbaric dictatorships. Liberals trust America's dictatorship as if it were instead a democracy. Conservatives do not, nor, of course, do progressives. FDR's vision of a United Nations which would set and enforce the rules for international relations, neither the U.S. nor any country would do that, is now even more rejected by the Democratic Party than it is by the Republican Party. And the politically topsy-turvy result is Democrats trying to impeach the Republican Trump for his trying to cut back on Obama's imperialistic, anti-FDR agenda. Trump, after all, didn't do the coup to Ukraine. Obama did. And that's the end of the article. There's the little ending kind of byline. Investigative historian Eric Zeus is the author most frequently of They're Not Even Close, The Democratic versus Republican Economic Records, 1910 to 2010, and of Christ Ventriloquist, the event that created Christianity. All right, so good article. Mr. Zeus, definitely not a Republican, definitely not a conservative, but an honest man. And for that, I will give him credit. And I will not disparage him because he's doing what he believes to be correct as best he can. That I cannot say for the liberals who were, basically attacking my wife at dinner. I can't say it for the liberals in my family. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. They read the New York Times and think they're informed. And it's a total joke. And, I'll keep my lid on as much as needed at the family gatherings. But, this year has been a war. You can look back at our videos from this year and see that, we covered the topics that we said we would back a year ago. And, we have pressed the narrative of freedom far and wide as hard as we can. And that's what we're going to do even more, 3 times more in 2020. I can't guarantee I'll make videos regularly because I have got a daughter and a new news that I'll throw in here for those of you who have stuck around for the whole video. We have another daughter on the way. Who will be born in late March or early April. And so, yeah, it's a busy house over here, and I can't be making videos as much as I used to, but I will continue to speak the truth as much as I can. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please give a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, share it wherever you can, and just know the truth, speak the truth, and never be afraid. No matter if the truth is called anti-Semitic or racist or whatever the stupid words are, this Orwellian newspeak, it doesn't matter. Speak your truth. And just, stay in that resonance of truth. And we will keep moving forward. And if you thought 2019 was an interesting battlefield for the information war, just hold on to your lug nuts and hang on to your cowboy hats, my brothers and sisters, because it's going to be a fun 2020. And on that, I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll be talking again soon. Cheers.
I